trusting, obeying my heavenly friend, resting in Jesus, my Lord.
Hi, I'm Ricky Burse, Executive Director of New Pathways for Children. New Pathways was started in 1990 with a vision to care for hurting children. Since that time, we've served hundreds of children in our group homes and facilities who've been neglected, abandoned, or abused. And unfortunately, in our country, there are thousands of those children who are suffering from that kind of neglect. Our mission at New Pathways is to minister to the physical, social, emotional, and spiritual needs of at-risk children in a Christ-like atmosphere. We provide them a home that is safe and secure, where they can be supervised and all their basic needs can be met. But we also provide them a home that is loving and caring, where they can be nurtured and encouraged to be all that God wants them to be. And of course, because we're a faith-based agency, spiritual values are the foundation of everything that we do. Thank you for joining us for this program. We have a special guest today, Sonny McManus, who is the chairman of our board of directors at New Pathways. Sonny, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Good. Tell us a little bit about yourself, personally and also professionally.
Well, I just recently retired from a school system where I was a math teacher for 17 years. And then I was a school administrator for an alternative school for 10 years. And really enjoyed that. I've been retired now for about a year. The last 10 years, I was a school administrator for an alternative school. And since I've retired, now I work for the state of Kentucky, and I'm on the road a lot, and I monitor alternative schools all across the state. And they may be group homes, they may be treatment centers, they may be psychiatric hospitals. So I'm still in the loop of serving at-risk kids. Personally, I'm married and I have 2 grown daughters and I have 1 granddaughter. And I always like to be around young people, and that's why I became a teacher.
Yep. Good. But you talked about your work in the school system and especially work in alternative type schools. What are some of the things you've seen over the years that have been going on with children and with families, some of the hurts and the struggles that cause some of the issues that we deal with at New Pathways?
Well, I think anybody that's in a service that provides services to children this day and time, whether it be a school teacher or a bus driver or a school secretary, anybody that's involved in kids will tell you that the kids today face a lot of risks that we didn't face in our generation. As a classroom teacher, before I became involved with the alternative programs, you know, I could tell from my students in the regular classrooms that the home structure has deteriorated. Whereas there used to be a 2-parent family, now there's 1, and sometimes there's none. Sometimes the child is actually living with the grandparent or with someone else, and basically legally they're determined homeless. So over the last 30 years that I've been in education, we've seen the deterioration of the structure of the home. And then when you go to the alternative setting, even more so, because my experiences with the alternative population is oftentimes when I interview a new student that comes into a program, you ask about their parents. They, 1, don't know their parents, 2, they have nothing to do with their parents, or 3, their parents are either incarcerated or dead. And you find that to be the norm. So these kids, as I taught with them in my current role as school monitor of alternative programs, I try to instill in them that God does not make junk, and that their lives matter, and they are people too, and they have every right to want to be successful. So they face even more challenges than our regular students do, and that's why they need more attention.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the number of years you've been involved in education, starting with teaching about 30 years ago. Currently in America, about 45% of the children who are born are born to single unwed mothers. And of course, you and I would believe, and a lot of folks would believe, that the best situation for a child is to be raised by a loving father and a loving mother in a home where they can be nurtured and encouraged. How have you seen the effects of fathers who are absent and the lack of the example of a father and the influence of a father in the life of some of these young people?
Well, that's really the number one problem is, you know, both parents, there is a lack of role models, but especially the father. And so what you see in these programs, there is always somebody who steps up and is identified as a role model, and whether, you know, it being male or female. And that's what's lacking in most of these kids' lives, if not all of them, is that they've never had the right father figure or role model, and that's what they're needing. And so when someone looks to you like that, you want to step up to the plate and you want to be a good role model. And I've been fortunate to work with people who work in alternative settings, who are not doing it just because of a paycheck, but because they really have the heart of the kid at stake, and they assume and accept the responsibility of being a role model for that student. And many of the students who have at one time were one of these at-risk students have grown up and become successful. And I'll give you one in particular, Hassan Davis, who is the former commissioner of the Department of Juvenile Justice. He was one of those kids. And if you ever get a chance to hear his testimony, I would invite you to take advantage of that, because he was literally in the street and close of getting killed or being arrested. But he grew up because of somebody that was a role model to him in these programs, and he's turned his life around, and now he's going out and affecting other people. And that's what we want to see. We want to break the cycle of generation poverty, of being at risk, so that people can become a role model for others like them and not become dependent upon the society.
And I know that's been an important part of your work and an emphasis, that you've wanted to be a good role model and a good example and help set some of these young people on the right track. And of course, that's what we want to do at New Pathways. Obviously, we want to get them in a safe environment first, but then we also want to get their lives turned in a better direction. So tell me a little bit about how you were first exposed to New Pathways, how you heard about it, how you first got involved with New Pathways for Children.
Well, I'm a native Western Kentuckian, and so I've lived here practically all my life. And I remember when New Pathways was first being discussed as a proposal. And then I saw it come to fruition. And I can remember back in the early 90s when it was being built, and I can remember the discussion of where it was going to be located and all that. And I even had a relative that worked for New Pathways at that time when it was on the ground floor. So on a personal standpoint, through the church, since it is affiliated with the Church of Christ, and that's where I worship, I was aware of the creation of New Pathways. And then as I became professional in education, it came full cycle, and I was asked to supervise a school at New Pathways as one of my duties back several years ago, and I become even more involved with New Pathways from a professional standpoint. And at that time, we had a school on campus, and I was the supervisor and the principal on staff of that school. And then after I attended one board meeting, I was asked to become a board member. And I thought about that, and I eventually did.
Okay. Now, you mentioned an on-site school at New Pathways, and in the past we have had a school on campus. Why is a school at a facility like New Pathways important for the children who are part of the program?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think the kids say it best. As I travel around Kentucky, in my present role at monitoring alternative schools for the state of Kentucky, my favorite part about that process is interviewing students. And I'll interview them by myself. It'll just be the students and I together in a room. And I'll ask them, what is the quality of education compared to if you were back at your home school. And I would say 99.9% of the time they would say it's better here because it's more structured. The staff, the teachers, and the whole staff, they care about us. They're more than just teachers. We have a problem, they're there for us. And so the kids really tell the story. And so sometimes, and I don't blame the public school teachers for this, but sometimes, they don't get the attention that they need simply because of the large numbers. It's just not practical to do so. And that's why it's important to have schools, on-site schools like this, so that they can get that special attention and structure that they won't get elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, I know when we had the school, most of the young people who were in our program, who were in our school, came behind. They had fewer credits than they should have for their age. They weren't on track academically, and so it became an opportunity for them to catch up. The one-on-one attention they were able to get, being in an environment where some of the distractions were removed. And one of the great things that we saw, and I know you were a part of some of those, were graduations.
Yes.
When these young men and young women would go through our program, they would get back on track academically and they would be able to graduate. Just talk a minute about some of the emotions, some of the things that you feel or you felt as an educator when you came to those graduations and you saw those young people being successful.
Well, I came out of a high school that graduated 300 students each year, and not everybody knew one another, obviously, and but the graduations were a big celebration. But then you bring it down to a smaller scale like New Pathways for Children, and where you may only have one graduate. But you would know it from the amount of effort that went into preparing for the graduation ceremony and the people attended, because it was just as much celebrated had there been 300 students graduating. And then when you see the parents come and really extended families, and the amount of emotion that they put into it, because they know and we know that that student would not have graduated had they been in a regular school system. So knowing that accomplishment for them and for their family, there's no words to explain that emotion, and there's no price that you could pay for it, because you made them accomplish or helped them to accomplish the first milestone in their life, whereas they otherwise would not have. So yeah, it's a very powerful moment for everybody.
Yeah, and you mentioned the families that come who often haven't been very involved in the life of these young people, but it seemed like they always wanted to come to the graduation. They wanted to participate and be there. And it was a great accomplishment for the young person. It was also something that the family could be proud of. And as a result, many of those young people after graduating have gone on to college, some of them to military or to trade schools, and really changed the course of their life in a more positive direction.
Absolutely.
Good. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with Sonny to talk some more about his work with New Pathways on the Board of Directors.
Trusting, obeying my heavenly friend, resting in Jesus, my Lord.
Welcome back. We're here with Sonny McManus, who is a native of Western Kentucky and also a very staunch supporter of our ministry at New Pathways. Sonny, you mentioned earlier the affiliation that we have with Churches of Christ. And back in 1990, many people in a number of area Churches of Christ were involved in the beginning of the ministry of New Pathways, and been involved over the years. And you mentioned you're a part of one of those congregations, and as a part of that church, you've been involved. And one of the ways that you've gotten involved is being a member of the board of directors. Just talk a little bit about what it's like to be a board member, what you've experienced, why you were interested in joining the board, and how that's maybe changed your perspective a little bit from being an outsider looking at the agency now to being an insider.
Well, I'll start with being back in high school, in a regular high school setting. That was very rewarding, and I was very content to do that. But I had looked for opportunities to go into administration. And so an opportunity presented itself to become an administrator at an alternative school in my district. And so I didn't know whether or not I would be successful at that. But I prayed about it, and if it was the right thing meant to be, I prayed that it would happen. And so I did that, and I stayed with it for 10 years, and I found it very rewarding. And while I was in that role, in that capacity, I had the opportunity to visit New Pathways in that role from a supervisory position and viewpoint. And as I alluded to earlier, I was asked to attend one of the board meetings. And so I did attend the board meetings and board meeting and listened to some of the issues that were going on. And I shared some of my thoughts. And then it dawned on me, you know, if one of the things that you can look at a problem is you can be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. And I thought, well, why don't I come on board and accept the invitation and try to be part of the solution of some of the issues that they were facing at that time. And so I did, and that's been about 6 years ago. And it's been very rewarding because you know, the Bible tells us, and I know you're very familiar with the verse in the book of James, that pure religion and undefiled before God the Father is to visit the fatherless and the widows in need and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. And so the fatherless are children. And Jesus, you know, he compared the kingdom of heaven to children. So what better way to serve Jesus than to serve children? And, you know, and I know I've been guilty of this too, is, you know, we look and we feel like, well, somebody else is going to take care of that. You know, yeah, you know, you see the need here, whether it be on TV or radio or through flyers or mail, and you think, yeah, I should help, but somebody else is going to take care of it. Well, that somebody else is you. That somebody else is me. And if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And so I think we have an obligation to the children. You know, we are so blessed to have our own children who are healthy and grandchildren. I have a grandchild now, and I think that even more so opened my eyes to the needs of children, is that not everybody has had the opportunity to say that I have had, or my children have had, or my granddaughter is having, but they're important too. And so it's important for us to step up to the plate and do what we can.
Talk just a little bit about what is the purpose of a board of directors for a nonprofit. What is the board looking at, looking for, looking to do? How does the board get involved, and how do they help the ministry? And of course, in your case, specifically, New Pathways.
Well, first of all, one thing the board does not do is that we don't run the daily operations of the facility. We hire an executive director such as yourself. And that's one thing, you know, I think that we need to put out there, that, you know, it's not a daily obligation. But what we do is now we meet every other month. And we talk about the concerns that we're having. You know, in any business organization, you have areas of concern. You have areas of need and of growth. And so those are the things that we talk about, the issues, whether that be about digging a new ditch for a sewage line, or whether it's talking about what a child needs. Those things come up, and of course you deal with those on a daily basis. But as we plan ahead, we've had long-term planning meetings of what we are going to do, what kind of services that we can offer for the community and for children down the road, because as society changes, we have to change with it to what the needs may be. We want to provide for those needs. So the board of directors are a support system to give you the support that you need, and to make sure that we're fulfilling the mission of New Pathways. And looking at the changes and then trying to roll with them.
Yeah. Now, we have a number of board members, usually anywhere from 15 to 18, and they're made up of a variety of people, different occupations, different places that they live throughout the community. How important do you think it is, now that you've been on the board, to have a good variety of board members as a part of that team?
Well, I think it's essential. I guess really New Pathways is probably the first board that I've ever served on, so I really didn't know exactly what to expect, but I have really enjoyed it, and I really understand now a whole lot more about New Pathways and how an organization like this operates, and the challenges and the struggles and the successes, and what it takes to do that. It takes teamwork. And you know, it takes a village, to coin an old phrase, and on our current board, you know, we have people from all walks of life, and that's what you need, and from different congregations. So you need a diversity of people. Not one person can do it. It takes people from different congregations in different areas, different walks of life, because you can learn from everybody. And that's what we need. And I would like to say to people who are listening to this, to learn more about New Pathways and what the mission of New Pathways is and what services that New Pathways is providing, and talk to one of the board members and consider yourself being on the board. You don't have to be a doctor or a lawyer, although we would take those, but you know, whoever you are. If you're a servant of God, if you're a Christian and you care about young people, then you're the type of person that we want on the board. That's a member of the church, and we need people because this isn't a life sentence. You know, it's a 3-year term, and you can renew for another 3 years, and so after 6 years, you know, you completed your 2 terms. So we have people coming on and people rotating off. So we always need an influx of new people and new blood.
Yeah. Now, one of the goals that we talk about a lot in board meetings, and I talk a lot about with my staff, is that we're taking children who have little hope and trying to bring hope into their life and give them new opportunity, give them new energy to go in a new direction. And so as you think about bringing hope to children in crisis, which is the way we state that goal, how do you feel like from the board's perspective that we're doing and accomplishing that and meeting that as one of our primary goals?
Well, you know, the old saying is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And some of the pictures that you have of the children, they say it best. But to see them as you bring them to church, and as recently you brought them to Bible school, and to be in their presence and to interact with them, and that you know that your dollars and that your time and efforts are going to salvage that child. As I alluded to earlier, you know, Jesus compared the kingdom of heaven to a child. And so I don't think there's any greater work that you can do than to make a difference in the life of a child. And then when you see, and as you know best yourself, as you see the hope in that child's eyes light up, and you know that you've made a turning point in that child's life, you know, what better thing could you do?
Yeah, very rewarding for sure. And I know being on the board and chairman of our board currently that you've seen that, and I see it daily. You know, it's hard, Sonny, for some people to believe that there are children in Western Kentucky and in, you know, neighboring states that go to bed every night hungry. It's hard to believe that children are going without adequate clothing, that they go daily wondering where they're going to be tonight and who's going to be there when they get there. And so giving them a secure place, a safe place, a place where they see the same faces and the same people daily does change that hopelessness, and you do see the light come on in their eyes, and that's an important thing. You've served on the board and previously have served a term as chairman of the board. and you are currently the chairman of the board of New Pathways. Talk just a little bit, explain, give a little perspective of what's different about being a board member as compared to being the chairman of the board.
Well, it's a leadership role. You know, the old saying is if you're leading and nobody's following, you're taking a walk. And so you want to be sure that you're leading in the right direction and that you have people who are following you. And also an old saying is don't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. So if you expect somebody to do something, then you need to be doing it yourself, such as, you know, we have a benefit dinner in the fall each year, you know, and the role of the chairman is to be there and to encourage others to be there and be active during the benefit dinner. And then the other fundraisers that we have through the year is to be part of that. And to spread the word whenever you go back to your regular congregations or the community and people ask questions about New Pathways is to support it and to embrace it and to answer questions about it so that people can learn more about it. And so it's a leadership role. I've been very honored to have served in that capacity twice now. I'm very humbled by that. But it's because of the quality of people who are on the board and the quality of the people that we have employed by New Pathways that it's just a great group of people. It's a very positive, uplifting, scriptural, spiritual type of relationship.
Yeah. In terms of time, how would you assess, is there much difference in the amount of time being on the board and being the chairman?
No, not really. You know, you might get a phone call or two from the executive director sometimes, but since now we meet every other month. You know, we were meeting monthly, which was a little time consuming, but we got it down to every other month. And I think that works out best for most people. And but no, it's really, you know, you just really need to have somebody there at the meetings to flow through the meetings, keep everybody on track, you know. And that's pretty much what the board chairman does during the meeting, is make sure that everything gets covered and keeps it going. So that we can get out of there at a decent time.
Yeah. And you do a good job of that. And I want to say thank you for your service to the board at New Pathways and as chairman. And you've been a great encourager and friend to me during the time that I've been here. And I've appreciated our working relationship very much and appreciated your support in many, many ways. And well, thankful for your being here with us today.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about New Pathways, you can find us on the web at www.npfc.net. We're also on Facebook at New Pathways for Children. We'd love for you to visit either one of those sites, check us out, and find out more about how maybe you can be involved in helping make the difference in the life of a child and bring hope to a child who is hopeless.